Maybe I'll get started with the land acknowledgement. So we are situated on Indigenous lands of many First Nations. The sacred land has been a site of human activity for over 15,000 years, serving as the home of Indigenous people and nations long before the colonial documentation of time. The territories of the Huron-Wendat, Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nations hold space for the daily activities of every settler that resides in the meeting place of Takaranto. As a reminder, we exist in connection to the One Dish, One Spoon Treaty, and as we learn from Indigenous teachings, it is our responsibility together to protect this land. As we discuss development and planning, we must recognize how these disciplines have been made exclusive and inaccessible, and how they have been weaponized against Indigenous people across Turtle Island. Within the context of social purpose real estate, we recognize both the opportunities and limitations of this form of development as we work towards reconciliation. And thank you. Okay, next slide, please. All right, welcome everyone. This is the third webinar that we're offering this month as part of this series. And if you've been in these webinars already, you'll know that we have recordings for the March 5th and March 12th webinars available on our website, which our team will share in the chat in just a moment. And we welcome everyone to view those webinars, and we'll also share a link to the recording from today's session. Next slide. So this webinar series is being offered in partnership as a partnership between the Infrastructure Institute and CP Planning as part of the Roadmap project, which Cheryl will talk about in just a second. But the Infrastructure Institute is a training, advisory, and interdisciplinary research hub at the University of Toronto School of Cities, and we seek to build local and global expertise in integrated planning for civil and social infrastructure, decision-making, and project delivery. And one of the programs that we offer is a social purpose real estate accelerator program, where we work with nonprofits across Ontario to support capacity building in the development of social purpose real estate projects like affordable housing. And I think I will pass it over to you, Cheryl.
Thanks, Alex. So yeah, really great to be here. So CPLANG is really pleased to be in partnership with the Infrastructure Institute on this project. We recognize their great leadership in training nonprofits and supporting them in their journey in affordable housing development. So we come into this space as urban planners. So we practice a human rights-based approach to urban planning, and this is grounded on directions and learnings from United Nations, National Housing Strategy Act, and in Ontario we have the very fantastic Ontario Human Rights Commission, who provides great guidance on the intersection of housing and human rights. And so with that, coupled with our 7 years of experience working directly with community, we have our human rights-based approach to planning, and I'll drop a link to that in the chat so you guys can get familiar with some of that work. And so we are a small nonprofit. We were founded in 2017, and we've grown to be a small team of about 12 urban planners, innovators, and strategists working with community. That means at the grassroots level with community organizations as well as with nonprofits who are all seeking to address the affordable housing crisis in their own way. And we're supporting them in exploring how they can identify and leverage the tools and assets in their community, example, land, to generate new affordable housing supply. So our mission is to align public, nonprofit, and private sector organizations on that mission of supporting the investment in infrastructure in alignment with the human rights to housing. So the roadmap for redevelopment plans to confront systemic racism is our largest project yet. So this is a really comprehensive project that spans across all of the Ontario municipalities that have received major investment in transit. So we're in Toronto, Peel, Hamilton, Ottawa, and we also have a touch of engagement in both York and Kitchener-Waterloo. We're supporting grassroots community organizations and established nonprofits in these cities to engage at the local level, and then to engage at a municipal level, that then at the interregional level between cities to share best practices, and then also to bring that knowledge at the federal level to ensure that there's alignment around, again, toward that mission that we have around cross-sectoral investment in affordable housing development. So a big part of that is in training and mentorship, which the Infrastructure Institute plays a large role through the accelerator program that is running now. We have a great cohort that Alex or Razid can always tell you more about another time. And that's through the Roadmap Connect program. But we also do a lot of other really cool things. You can see our link in the chat. The Roadmap page has a lot of documentation on our impact and next steps that we identified last year at our big celebration to celebrate 1 year of the roadmap. And we'll be very excited to share with folks the journey that we'll be taking on and our celebration that will be taking place this November as well. So for today's session, we're very glad to have two fantastic speakers who will be presenting to you about the fantastic work that they do and how they can support community organizations and nonprofits to finance affordable housing development. We have great leaders from Van City and from Tapestry here today. So they'll introduce the approach to recruiting, retaining, and building capacity on your board to take on ambitious long-term projects of financing new affordable housing development. So what you'll take away from this is how to get your board on board and then also to sustain their support. What is the key information that they need to know in order to achieve that outcome?
Apologies, I just realized this is the topic for today is financing. So this was the first one that we offered this month. So
Okay.
our mistake. Sorry about
that. Okay. Yeah. All right. So our first panelist is Suzanne Faiza. So she's a knowledge lead at Tapestry Community Capital. Suzanne, you can take it off from here.
Amazing.
Oh, and also I want to say, so the format, so they're going to do the presentations and then there's going to be a short question and answer period. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or directly email or message them to myself or Alex. Thanks.
Thank you all so much. Thanks, Cheryl, for that introduction and Alex for the invitation. It's a real pleasure to be hosted by the Infrastructure Institute and CP Planning. So as mentioned, my name is Suzanne Faiza and I'm Tapestry Community Capital's Knowledge Lead. My work really entails, and I'm just going to share my screen before I complete that sentence. Yes, and... great. And so my work really entails building knowledge around building awareness of community bonds and community finance at large through education, policy, and research. So today I'm definitely wearing my education hat. So Alex started off with us off with like a wonderful land acknowledgement, but I just wanted to add a few extra pieces. So I am joining you from Treaty 13 territory to Toronto, and today we'll really be discussing community financing techniques and tools that can assist us with the acquisition and development of land. And for me, it's really important to remember and name how many of these lands came into settler hands in the first place through treaty, sale, expropriation, and outright theft, erasure, and genocide of Indigenous peoples across Turtle Island. And so with that sort of grim reminder, at Tapestry, what we hope is that as we, our issuers and investors, scale our work across Turtle Island, that we grow into decisions that account for and integrate truth, reconciliation, 7 generations, decision-making, and longer tables and deeper dishes for us all as we continue to build and deliver critical resiliency tools, just straight up housing for our various communities. So with that, I will jump into my entire conversation around who is Tapestry, what are community bonds, and how they've been used in affordable housing. So about Tapestry. Tapestry Community Capital is a nonprofit cooperative. Our aim is to democratize access to capital through the use of community investment tools, and we guide social purpose organizations to successfully plan for, raise, and administer community bonds. Our work grew out of supporting renewable energy cooperatives and has now expanded to supporting nonprofits and charities and cooperatives in the arts and culture, education, community hubs, and sometimes food security, and now affordable housing sectors across the nation. So with that, what on earth is a community bond? So for me, I think there are two key definitions that are important to note. First is that a community bond is actually a very simple tool, and it's honestly a loan. So by issuing community bonds, community organizations are actually just very simply borrowing money from their community of supporters for a particular value, term, and rate. So, for example, $500 for 2 years, that's a term, and 3.5%. So that's the interest rate. And as seen in the diagram on the screen, like having access to this capital from their supporting community investors, social purpose organizations, such as grassroots community organizations, are able to finance their projects and kickstart crucial work that supports the resilience of their communities. Community bonds, though, are also a private exempt market security. So let me define that. So by private, this means that you won't find them on the Toronto Montreal Stock Exchange. And by exempt, this means that community organizations don't have to create administratively burdensome prospectuses the same way that you would for a typical bond on, say, the TMX, etc. So community bonds work well with alongside other types of financing, such as traditional loans, impact loans, mortgages, as well as donations. And typically in a community, in a capital stack, community bonds will be paid out after a mortgage, etc. But why community bonds? What is the value add? If it's just very simply a loan, what does it actually deliver? So for me, there are 4 key value adds that I really want to highlight. First is the flexibility of the tool. A community bond is a tool that really values returns holistically, where social, cultural, and environmental returns are valued just as much as financial ones. And what this allows is that organizations are actually setting their own terms. They're setting the terms and contract of their loan. So the interest rate, the repayment terms, the maturity, and these can be designed to meet project milestones and cash flow needs. And what we're also seeing is that there's a lot of co-creation, like organizations that we work with are also working with their community of investors to set up these terms. And it's sometimes a very beautifully participatory method and framework. And what the end result really is in organizations being able to access more equitable and accessible financing terms that fully recognizes the value of the work that they do. The second piece is inclusivity. So bonds can have both retail and institutional. So this institutional really involves like businesses, high net worth individuals, and like foundations, etc. Retail investors are people like you and me who may not be high net worth, but still have like a little bit of cash that we can maybe invest in a community bond. And bonds can be priced as low as $500 to allow widespread community participation. This is something that we're also actively working on at Tapestry, is to like reduce that barrier down from 500 to maybe lower 250, 100. Those are our goals. And interest paid out from these community bonds are to community supporters, so enabling community wealth building on multiple levels. So not just thinking about communal/nonprofit ownership of assets, but also thinking about the financial returns that do go back into community. The second bit is the third and fourth point is that they're timely. So they require about a third of the time of a traditional donation campaign. And this becomes even more true as we think about how affordable housing providers need to access larger sums of capital. Like we're thinking, 5 million is the kind of minimums that some folks are looking at to raise. So instead of a traditional donation campaign, and unlike government grants, community bonds can be planned to meet organizations' cash flow needs. And also with the scalability, like with many investors choosing to reinvest, there's a huge opportunity to build out a pipeline of future projects and continue to engage that new investor base that an organization creates. So for example, SolarShare, which is one of Tapestry's clients and one of our earliest issuers, is North America's largest solar renewable energy cooperative, and they've run multiple bond campaigns with Tapestry. Their first raise was a few $100,000. One of their last raises was over 10 million, and they've continuously been able to engage a community of like over 1,000 investors over a decade. So there's a real scalability prospect here. But does a community bond fit for all organizations? And I think this is a really important thing for folks who are attempting to consider, does this make sense for me? This seems like a really cool model, but is it right for us? So we have a list of like about 5 points that we like to remind folks about. So first is that projects need to be projects that are pitched that are best suited for community bonds are ones that have meaningful social and environmental impacts. They also generally have a raise target of 1 to 10 million in community bonds. This number is rising with affordable housing providers, and that the funds raised are for capital assets and major equipment because you're often securing your bonds against the asset. In terms of internal capacity, also like organizations need to have the internal capacity to support a community bond campaign. And last but never least, a sustainable revenue model with which to repay investors with. This is repayable capital. It might be at a slightly more accessible term, but like the reality is that you do need to repay your investors, both in terms of the with interest and also with the principal as well. Although there are oftentimes that, once again, with reinvestment, sometimes it cycles back into organizations, but generally keeping these things in mind is really critical. So how does Tapestry support nonprofit housing providers? So as mentioned earlier, we do support organizations, and we do this through a 4-phase process. So first is our planning and feasibility. This is where we really get organizations to do things like a business plan, pitches, and also like what we like to call a sidewalk pitch, and also really critically financial modeling. So this really helps us determine, is a community bond the right tool for you and your organization at this point? Do you have the projects in line? Do you have the revenue models in place? Do the financial projections really pencil out? And if it does, then we can move on to structuring, which is putting together the structuring documents such as an offering memorandum and doing a legal review. So yes, while I mentioned, no prospectus is required, we do like getting folks to put together an offering memorandum. This helps tell investors, what the project is about, who's behind the team, what funds will be used for, and what risks are entailed within investing in the project, and what kind of mitigation strategies the organization may have. The third phase after that is moving on to the raise. So Tapestry does not directly sell the bonds for organizations. Organizations go out into their community and actually do the direct sale. But what we can do is help, and what we do is help put together marketing and PR for the raise, and also strategies on how to engage investors and stuff like that. And then last one but not least, after the raise is completed, we also do, like, through our in-house management system, like T5s, interest disbursements, etc. So that way investors are also paid back at a consistent timeline, etc. And there's continuously trust being built. So have community bonds been used in affordable housing? Yes, actually. So we're currently funded by the CMHC to tailor the use of community bonds with 6 affordable housing providers across the country. And these are the organizations that we're working with for our first investing in housing program. So Redwood Park Communities is hoping to raise $10 million for their next project, which will be a mixed-use building on church land in Barrie, Ontario. So they have both a school, affordable housing, and market rate housing together. And they're hoping to launch their community bond campaign in April. So we're very excited for that. Kensington Market Community Land Trust is essentially doing a revolving loan fund style raise. So they're hoping to develop essentially a revolving loan fund, and they're in order to do multiple acquisitions in the Kensington Market neighborhood. And their campaign launched yesterday. So please check them out on the Kensington Community Bond through their website, and check out the Kensington Community Bonds. Indwell is using community bonds to finance 4 projects in Hamilton. They launched their community bond campaign last Friday, so please check out their Hope and Homes Hamilton community bonds. Indwell, as many folks know, is a very large housing provider, and they do some amazing work. Our fourth provider that we're working with is Propolis Housing Cooperative. They're a brand new cooperative, less than 2 years old, or about 2 years old, and they're our first BC-based community bond issuer. So typically, community bonds have been issued in Ontario and Quebec. We really broke ground with Propolis, and they're using community bonds to acquire their first building and then also redevelop it into a net zero cooperative. So as of February 29th, Propolis has both used community bonds and impact loans to acquire that very first building. A very brand new co-op in the interior of BC has just secured their very first property, and their community bond campaign is not done yet. They're continuing on with it to secure some more funds to take out the bridge impact loans. Ottawa Community Land Trust is also hoping to build a revolving loan fund similar to KMCLT to secure more acquisitions of their second and third, fourth buildings in Ottawa. They're also hoping to do a launch in April. And last, I want to kind of do a case study on our final campaign, which has been completed, and that's Places for People. So Places for People is a rural charity in Haliburton County, which is one of the poorest counties in Ontario. They are facing a large population boom, especially after COVID. But what they were discovering was that regular folks who form a part of the tourism industry and are part of the year-round community are unable to stay in the county because of rising costs, especially in housing. And they saw this starting in 2010, and that problem has only just deepened. And so Places for People was established in 2010, and through their work, they've housed 24 families, and 7 of these families have transitioned to home ownership, which is incredible. So as I mentioned in my previous slide, community bonds are being used very differently by different issuers because of their different needs. And this goes back to the flexibility of the tool. So for Places for People, they raised $850,000 to refinance their existing separate mortgages on their existing 12 units. And what they were hoping to do was build future financial resilience by having cheaper capital on their loans on their mortgages for their existing units. So in June of 2023, which is just a year ago, Places for People launched their community bond campaign under the Investing in Housing program. And with their volunteer-led team, they raised $850,000 in 2.5 months from 72 investors who made 80 investments. This is actually our fastest campaign that we've ever had. So it was really exciting to see that it actually took place in a rural county. And 87% of the investment came from retail investors, while 13% of it came from institutional investors. And what we thought was really cool was that most of the investment came from local investors within the Haliburton County, Minden, and Algonquin Highlands regions, municipalities, etc. So it was really cool to also see that they were not just securing folks who were high net worth, etc., but they were actually securing investment from their neighbors, etc. So that was really, really promising and really, really inspiring for us to see. And so with that success story of rural resilience, I will end my presentation. Thank you all for your time. I know that was a lot of information. Once again, thank you to the Infrastructure Institute and CP Planning for hosting me today. So please feel free to reach out with any questions that you have, and I look forward to hearing questions, comments, and feedback. Thank you so much.
Awesome, Suzanne. That was super, super inspiring. Yeah, so that example of the great success with that, the last organization that you presented, which was one of your first organizations on housing, really hoping to see that similar level of success for the more recent projects. I was super excited when I saw Kensington Market launch their fund. So really, really excited for and really grateful for all the great work that you're doing. I see that some folks have started adding in questions in the comments, so feel free if you have a question that's popped up, you can still add them in or message Alex or myself directly. So next we have another amazing speaker, Carly, is it Bringeland?
Close, Bringland, yeah.
All right, Carly Bringland. So she's a commercial account manager with Van City Community Investment Bank, a subsidiary of Van City Credit Union, Canada's only impact-focused Schedule 1 bank. Love if you can explain what that means to the audience. At VCIB, Carly pursues new lending opportunities and oversees a portfolio of existing loans, all of which have a positive social impact in community. In her over 5 years of history with Van City Group, Carly has overseen the financing of over 800 new existing affordable housing units across Ontario, including housing co-ops, land trusts, and various other affordable rental and ownership models. So thank you so much, Carly, for your time today and looking forward to your presentation.
Great, well, thank you so much for having me. I will share my screen here. Can everybody see that window okay? Yeah, awesome. Yeah, so thank you so much, Infrastructure Institute and CP Planning, for organizing this and for having me here. I'm really excited also to be joining Tapestry for the session. I know a lot of our work overlaps, and I think we've seen a lot of the same projects, but different in terms of the tools that we offer. So different, adding different value in this session. So my name is Carly, and thank you so much for the introduction. I'm also here in Toronto, the traditional territory of multiple Indigenous nations, including the Haudenosaunee and the Treaty Territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit. I'm a commercial account manager at Van City Community Investment Bank. And what that means is I work with our clients to support new lending opportunities, existing loans, mostly all of which are commercial real estate loans, and all of which have a positive social impact in the community. It presents in a variety of ways. Frequently, it's affordable housing, housing co-ops, land trusts, new rental construction, purpose-built rental projects, affordable rental and ownership models on the housing side. Not specifically on the housing side, we also see green buildings, heritage buildings, and community and cultural spaces. So for those of you who aren't familiar, Van City Community Investment Bank is the only Canadian bank that works exclusively with organizations that drive social, economic, and environmental change. We're a wholly owned subsidiary of Van City Credit Union. Van City Credit Union is Canada's largest credit union, has over 75 years of history and over 500,000 members. Van City Credit Union operates in British Columbia, primarily the Greater Vancouver area, as you can probably tell by the name. And we, Van City Community Investment Bank, also known as VCIB, have a banking license to operate federally across Canada. To date, most of our work and most of our clients are in Southern Ontario. And our head office, as you can probably tell, is here in Toronto. So in addition to our work in real estate, we also finance clean energy and energy efficiency projects. Those two focus areas really come together, and we look at affordable and sustainable communities. I think since 2009, the Van City Group together has funded around $1.5 billion in support of affordable housing across Canada. So there's a really deep history in the space. On top of that, VCIB is a B Corp and is part of the Global Alliance for Banking on Values. So the Global Alliance for Banking on Values operates under 5 main principles. Those are social and environmental impact and sustainability. Second, grounded in communities, serving the real economy, enabling new business models. Third, long-term relationships with clients. Fourth, self-sustaining and resilient. And finally, fifth, transparent and inclusive governance. As I mentioned, we're also a B Corp, which means we meet vigorous standards of social and environmental performance, accountability, and transparency. So all of this is very high level, but really on a day-to-day for the real estate team, what it boils down to is that we provide construction, term, and acquisition financing for commercial real estate projects that drive social, economic, and environmental benefits in communities across Canada. In our world and also in this group, we all know that as social purpose real estate. We finance affordable housing, green buildings, arts, culture, and community spaces, nonprofit and charity-owned properties, co-op housing, heritage buildings, investor-owned real estate, and owner-occupied real estate. We do a lot of work with nonprofits, charities, foundations, social enterprises, B corporations, co-ops, purpose-driven businesses. Some of our clients are highlighted on this slide. You can see Anishwabe Health Toronto, the Centre for Social Innovation, NACA, or the National Aboriginal Capital Corporation Association, Trillium Housing, Options for Homes, Christie Ossington Neighborhood Centre, among others. Some of the affordable housing providers we work with include the Parkdale Neighborhood Land Trust, Houses Opening Today Toronto, and Habitat for Humanity Canada, and some regional affiliates as well. We've also partnered with organizations that many of you may be familiar with, Canadian Network of Community Land Trusts, Co-op Housing Federation of Canada, and Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation, or CMHC. Most often, our financing is directed to address, core needs of affordable housing providers. Those are large capital expenditures, deferred maintenance and repairs, acquisitions, purchases, and mortgage refinancing. We also offer investment options, which affordable housing providers can access to house their reserve funds, which I'll touch more on later on. There's a number of benefits to working with a bank that understands affordable housing. We are able to structure and offer competitive and flexible funding terms that are really catered to suit the needs of affordable housing providers. This includes preferred debt service coverage ratios, loan to value ratios, fees, interest rates. But on top of that, we're a full service bank. So in addition to real estate and clean energy project financing, we offer business banking and deposit or investment services, as well as a business Visa card. You'll see on the screen the shared interest Visa business. It's good for daily expenses for organizations. And the somewhat unique thing about the card is that each time it's used for each transaction, the bank donates 10 cents to our shared interest fund, which is then granted back into our communities. Two types of financing you'll see on this slide that we often see with affordable housing providers are term financing and real estate secured lines of credit. Term financing is really best for acquisitions, mortgage refinancing, really big ticket items. It's a single advance of funds. Terms range between 1 and 5 years, and it's repaid over time, usually over a 25 or 30-year amortization period. That gets longer with CMHC insurance involved. Real estate secured lines of credit are better for loosely defined programs, things like repairs, capital expenditures. Multiple advances are permitted, and the line of credit's really flexible on drawdown and repayment. We also offer construction financing, which is not on this slide, but that's really structured around new building construction, ground up developments, and larger renovations, retrofits. With the real estate secured lines of credit, those are usually based on a fixed or a variable rate, a floating rate. That's how they can be a little bit more flexible on the drawdowns and repayments. Term financing is structured more typically with fixed interest rates that's fixed for that 1, 3, 5-year term. Typically, to get started with these types of financing, we'd ask for financial statements, a balance sheet, an income and expense statement, a budget, a rent roll. In most instances, we'd also ask for a building condition report, an appraisal, environmental reports. What we require often varies by transaction. So we really recommend to get in touch with us prior to ordering and paying for those third-party reports, so that we can give a better indication of what we'd actually need depending on the project. Depending on the scope, the size, the location, all of those things come into play. So I'll touch on a few of our clients, some of which some of you may be familiar with, and the first being the Parkdale Neighborhood Land Trust. So the Parkdale Neighborhood Land Trust is a grassroots community-based land trust that focuses on protecting affordable rental stock in the gentrifying neighborhood of Parkdale. We were able to structure and provide some unique and creative financing for Parkdale Neighborhood Land Trust in 2020, which they used to acquire an at-risk residential building, 36 units on Maynard Avenue in Parkdale. The building was at risk of being sold on the open market, could be purchased by any developer. But Parkdale Neighborhood Land Trust was able to use VCIB's financing to bridge the equity gap that they needed to acquire the building and ultimately preserve all 36 of those units as affordable rental units. As well, in April 2022, we provided financing that the Parkdale Neighborhood Land Trust used to acquire a larger portfolio of affordable housing. It was 153 units over 81 properties. Those units were originally owned by the City of Toronto and Toronto Community Housing Corporation, TCHC. Where after they acquired them, Parkdale Neighborhood Land Trust partnered with YWCA as their social housing provider, and they now offer affordable housing for those existing tenants as well as women-led families. Another organization that we work with is Phoenix Housing Co-op. Phoenix Housing Co-op is a cooperative housing provider in London, Ontario. They were originally built, the co-op was originally built in 1975 with mortgage financing from CMHC. It's a 59-unit, newly renovated 3-bedroom, multi-story townhouses. Those townhouses are rented at only $760 a month, which in London, Ontario, significantly below market rent for the property. Some tenants at the property even pay further reduced rent based on their income, which is made possible with grants from CMHC. Phoenix Housing Co-op kind of uniquely was the 3rd co-op in Canada to refinance their mortgage for the first time in 2014 when those original mortgage funds originally from CMHC came due. In 2023, Phoenix Housing Co-op again refinanced their mortgage, this time with VCIB. And recognizing that co-ops charge their members only enough to cover costs, repairs, and reserves, we were able to structure a really tailored financing solution for Phoenix Housing Co-op that ensured all 59 of those units could remain affordable for their membership. Finally, I will highlight Houses Opening Today Toronto, which we also know as HOTT. HOTT is a housing provider in Toronto that's committed to developing and maintaining quality, affordable housing, while also providing supports that meet the really diverse needs of individuals and families that they serve. So with support from VCIB and the City of Toronto's multi-unit residential acquisition funding program, which is also known as MIRA, HOTT recently acquired a 22-unit affordable rental building in Toronto's Annex neighborhood. This was their 13th acquisition, and I think just completed in the last couple of months. At the same time as the acquisition, where VCIB provided some acquisition financing, mortgage financing, we approved and committed a second facility that HOTT will be able to draw on in the future for capital repairs, installing heat pumps at the property when they need to. In this transaction, the agreement between the City of Toronto and HOTT ensures that all residential units will remain as affordable rental housing, which that means at or below 80% of average market rent. So switching gears a little bit from the lending side, as I mentioned previously, VCIB is a full service bank, so we can offer various investment solutions for affordable housing providers as well. Our high interest savings account, which you see on this slide, currently offers 5.35% returns. That's as of March 21st. And it's a high interest savings account that's really tailored and designed to help nonprofit affordable housing providers manage savings and reserve funds in a really safe and secure way. It's also totally liquid, so that those funds aren't fixed there for a period of time. We also offer GICs, guaranteed investment certificates. Those are low risk, non-concessionary vehicles for really simple values-aligned investments. They can be accessed in both fixed term and cashable options. And importantly, all of the GICs, 100% of the GICs that are invested with VCIB help to finance impactful projects in affordable housing, clean energy, and really the growth of mission-driven organizations. Current rates for GICs vary based on term length. Again, as of March 21st, we were able to offer 4.1% on or 4.8% on a 1-year fixed term, 4.2% on 2- and 3-year fixed terms, and 4.7% on a 1-year escalator cashable impact GIC. So that's really the work we do and what we do in a nutshell. of course, every project is vastly different. There's a lot of nuance to the work. So of course, happy to answer any questions in the Q&A section, and would always encourage folks to reach out if you'd like to discuss a specific project, or if there's questions that don't get asked in this section. We're always happy to connect, even if a project is 2, 3, 5, 7 years out. The earlier the better. Often we try to be trusted advisors and always a resource just to bounce ideas off of, or talk to, or review a pro forma. So we're always happy to connect and here to help. But thank you again for having me. Excited to be here and answer some questions in the Q&A.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Carly. I really appreciate your presentation. I'm always so blown away when people who understand finance explain such a deep, complex world, and the value you bring to the movement. It cannot be understated. It's essential, right? You kind of take these ideas and you bring that financial knowledge and magic to make it work. So thank you so much. So I'm going to go first with the question that's in the chat. And this question is to Suzanne. So the question, it's to Suzanne, I believe. So if the bond is secured against the asset in the case of affordable housing, are there any issues to securing other financing? Example, CMHC typically wants to be the first mortgage secured on the property. What are the impacts to the funding stack on projects?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So typically what we see is that community bonds are registered as the second charge, meaning that they come they are paid out after CMHC financing or bank financing. They can also be third or fourth, depending on how many commercial lenders slash CMHC loans are already on title, because they might be on title. So far what we have seen is that we haven't seen other lenders back out because community bonds will also be registered on title. That's not to say that it couldn't happen. So we always get our issuers to ask permission. And so for example, in the case of Endwell, Series C bonds, which are RRSP and TFSA eligible, are registered on title. And all remaining series, so you can have multiple kinds of series, so series A, B, D, and E are unsecured. And so Endwell has noted that they would attempt to sell their properties, etc., should they ever be in default with bondholders, but it isn't necessarily guaranteed. And for example, with other lenders, such as for example, Propolis, some of the impact loans came with certain requirements that I cannot directly speak to. So the answer is that it really depends on the lenders in question, the organization, and what kind of things they can figure out. But as of right now, we haven't actually seen lenders back out because community bonds are on title. So yeah, it really is a tailoring conversation.
Carly, I'm curious if you found similar situations with your financial tools.
Yeah, so a lot of the projects that we do, especially on the construction side, we'll see community bonds in the capital stack as well. And I think a couple of considerations for us with those community bonds, just things we look at are, the overall structure of them, what is the amount of them being injected into the project? When are they coming due? Will the organization have or the project have the resources, ability to repay both our financing and the community bonds, once the project is complete. Those are kind of some of the main things we look at. There is quite a bit of nuance to it, but we're really open to working with community bonds in our capital stacks. We see it on quite a bit of our projects that we look at, especially for affordable housing, nonprofit housing developers, where they might not necessarily have that $1, $2, $3 million of cash equity in the bank in order to get that in the project. While we won't finance the entire project, there's some creative structures that we can look at and develop with community bonds involved.
Awesome, thanks for sharing that. So I'm going to just I think in your presentations, you had a slide with folks with your contacts. I'm gonna just drop it in the chat in case folks would like to just be able to copy paste and get more detailed responses and maybe to explore collaboration. I'm glad that you found those responses useful, Jennifer. Again, I wanted to prompt folks if they have any questions, you can definitely throw them in the chat. So in the lieu, I'll ask the questions that I have. So I'd love to learn what lessons can be drawn from organizations that have successfully leveraged these resources to address community needs effectively. Maybe we'll go with Carly again. Since you ended first, you can start first.
Sure. I mean, I think there's probably a million answers that I can think of to this question. But one thing that comes to mind is really the value of partnerships, especially in some of the earlier, newer, or smaller developers or nonprofit housing providers. You really see great success. Some of the providers we're seeing, or developers we're seeing, are partnering with larger for-profit developers to support their projects. That comes with a larger balance sheet, that in-house development expertise that the smaller, the nonprofit housing developer might not necessarily have or have built up yet. So there's a lot of really successful partnerships, not only on the development side, but also with with organizations like CMHC or with government funders, other organizations that come to the table. I think collaboration and partnership is really leads to a lot of success in these projects.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of pieces that come to mind. I mean, with a lot of the folks that we work with, these are nonprofits that are first just getting into the concept of thinking beyond grants and donations and actually thinking through what does doing a nonprofit housing in an entrepreneurial way look like for us? How do we balance the needs of financing, whether traditional or alternative, etc., into our work? And so it's a lot of there is like a learning curve around, what, like, some people don't know what a capital stack is, but many do, or some people need to get comfortable with the idea of debt, etc., and like the fact that their boards have never done this before. And so instead of like doing traditional donations and grants, they're actually having to talk to their boards and actually get them on board, etc. Like there's a whole host of like capacity building within organizations that often needs to be done. And those are a whole host of the conversations that we actually have even during planning and feasibility with our clients, is getting to that comfort level and doing that financial modeling. So those kinds of, that education piece continues to be really, really relevant and important for organizations. The second piece also is around building, especially for our work, that concept of investors, like who is an investor? A lot of folks are like, but we don't have a network. Like, how could we possibly ever do this? And like one thing, like an organization that we worked with called Argonaut Rowing Club, etc., what they realized was that they actually had like vendors and like folks, businesses that were part of their network, etc., that they could actually talk to and leverage. And in fact, those were many of the organizations that did choose to invest in ARC's community bonds. And in many ways, there are also similar things with nonprofit housing providers. And going back to Carly's piece around partnerships, is like these relationships really are ones that you can continue to leverage even with investments. So like building up relationships is crucial to any kind of work, etc. So yeah, so there's the building capacity, building relationships, and continuing to understand, like, how do we work entrepreneurially? So those are my kind of two major insights.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Suzanne. So I'm gonna pick on you for the response for the next question, because you touched upon something here I think is really that I'd like to dig into more, and that's that aspect of needing to kind of take an entrepreneurial approach to addressing the housing crisis. It's very clear the nonprofit sector is committed in terms of affordable housing development and also sustaining that housing. But with that responsibility, there's a lot of risk involved, especially when you're needing to kind of test out and explore new models, because there's not just an easy framework to just jump in and plug into. And so my question is two-part. And so what are some of the initial things that a board should have in place to help them in terms of being able to transition into exploring models like what you guys offer? And then the second part is in terms of racialized communities, are you finding that there are any unique challenges or opportunities that exist within those communities when they are exploring these options for affordable housing financing?
Okay. In terms of the first question, which is like, what have we seen being powerful in terms of getting boards on board? It's usually some sort of a champion. Like we've seen like people who are within staff or even within boards who are really, really interested in the model and are willing to continue having multiple ongoing conversations with their board around the conversation of how do we scale our work, what is like what are the other tools that we can use and how can we use them safely? Because many boards are, with good reason, conservative around around the use of finances, and like there are some genuinely good questions that, for example, our campaigns team has received from boards. It's like, and because we do want folks to use community bonds in like a thoughtful and safe manner. Like, and I use I don't like the term safe is like, we don't want organizations using tools and then getting themselves into financial instability. The tools to build financial stability, not contribute to financial instability. So there's a whole host of like education also around the tool and really what it entails. Like this is also why we promote this, like just being simple around what a community bond is. It's very simply a loan. And I think like without getting into the entire, it's a fixed income instrument like a GIC, because that actually complicates things more than just simply saying it's a loan, guys. Very simply, it's a loan from a community member, etc. Thinking through also, and this kind of moves us into answering your second part of the question, which is around racialized communities. Like what a lot of racialized communities are realizing is that they've actually been implementing very similar tools for many generations. There has been, historic disinvestment. And so communities actually were investing in themselves, whether you're thinking about Roscas or Susus or family associations in Chinatown pooling together funds in order to buy buildings for their family associations to be in, right? So you actually see that historically many racialized communities have been doing very similar crowdfunding, crowd financing, and using very similar tools. So when you actually locate it back into these historic models, there's a lot of comfort, because then they're like, oh, actually, we've been doing this and we know how to do this. And it's actually within, these aren't foreign tools. These are tools that our communities have historically used to empower ourselves, and we can continue to use them in maybe a different form and in a different way to engage newer folks, but also our communities as well. So yeah, that would be my two kind of insights on those questions.
Thank you. And Carly, any thoughts on that? And actually, maybe I'm gonna throw in the last two questions. So I think you're gonna have like the last word before the institute wraps up the call. So we can try to, like, in 2.5 minutes respond to the questions I asked earlier, but then also there's two questions in the chat about any resources recommended for capacity building to help folks get ready for resources like what you offer. And then So Jennifer asked about the nonprofits repaying bonds through subsequent bonds. So Suzanne, in one word, if you can respond to that question, have nonprofits repaid first round through subsequent rounds of selling bonds?
Yes, they have. And
Okay.
also cooperatives have, like renewable energy cooperatives have done the same. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Suzanne. So yeah, Carly, you have a very, very hard task of responding to all the questions.
Sure. I think I can, I'll tie my answer together for two of them. The one on the regarding boards and as well as resources for increasing knowledge. Part of the reason I'll tie those together is because, what I've found is helpful in bringing boards on board with some of this work is sharing those resources, sharing the education. Often or occasionally, we'll get the chance to go and speak with the board directly and meet with them and share some of, from the financing side, what we look at, what we see, what our perspective is on the project and share our recommendations or guidance for the organization and the board. So really that capacity building, that knowledge sharing is something that, boards tend to value and helps with their decision making in those pieces. And then in the capacity building piece, resources, a few that come to mind, just organizations that are doing a lot of good work in bringing some of these resources together. The Ontario Nonprofit Housing Association is one. CHF, Cooperative Housing Federation of Canada, is another. Of course, Infrastructure Institute, CMHC, and then the Canadian Network of Community Land Trusts, based on the organization type. I think to the next question, I'll really echo Suzanne's point of, racialized communities investing in themselves and developing a lot of those tools before they were really, had a name or were really mainstream. We see that with how land trusts came to be and how housing co-ops came to be. And those are things that we tend to, or we really prioritize investing in and financing and allocating capital to grow that sector and to grow that network. And that's a main focus of ours. I hope I didn't go over time. I think I addressed all the questions. Thank you.
I think, yeah, you did a great job. So I'll pass it off to Alex, and thank you so much, Carly and Suzanne, for your wonderful presentations and your generosity and your responses to those questions. Really greatly appreciated. Alex?
Thanks, Cheryl. Yeah, that was really great. I really appreciated that full conversation and all the questions asked too. And I echo what Cheryl has said. I appreciate everything that you've brought to the conversation today. And this is the last webinar that we have in this series scheduled for right now. And so our team will share the recording and the slides, if our speakers are okay with that too, with everyone, and are happy to answer any questions that folks have after today. So thanks, everyone. That's it.